Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Butcher Shop, where the meat meets the water. On this episode, I'm joined by Brendan Ruch, the inventor of the nut job. We take a deep dive into the nut job from its accidental invention to its deliberate refinement. We cover everything from the vice to the water. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. To make sure you don't miss a single episode of The Butcher Shop, be sure to subscribe in the podcatcher of your choice. We're only distributing episodes on the Articulate Fly for a limited time. And if you like the podcast, please tell a friend and subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And finally, a shout out to our sponsor, Trout Routes. I've known the team at Trout Routes almost before there was a team at Trout Routes. We all know streams are getting crowded, and chances are you're not the only one at your local access point. Get away from the crowds and busy gravel lots by using Trout Routes Pro with over 350,000 access points mapped across 50,000 trout streams and much more. Trout Routes has all the data you need to help you find angling opportunities that others will overlook. Up your game and download the app today. Use code ARTFLY20, ARTFLY20, all one word, for 20% off of your Trout Routes Pro membership at maps.troutroutes.com. And a shout out to our friends at Schultz Outfitters. Schultz Outfitters is Southern Michigan's premier fly and tackle shop, and the guys at Schultz Outfitters are some of the fishiest dudes on the planet. Book a day on the water, swing by the shop, or check out one of their mini classes taught by some of the best anglers and tyers in the game today. Check them out at schultzoutfitters.com or give them a shout at 734-544-1761. Now, on to our interview. Well, Brendan, welcome to the Butcher Shop.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And, we're going to take a deep dive into the nut job this evening, folks. And I guess, Brendan, the best place to kick this off is, where did the name of the fly come from?
For a while, I was kind of rebelling against naming flies, as you do when you think you're too cool for that kind of stuff. And when the A-Rex video came out and it was called the Leggy Hair Day, I figured that probably wasn't the right move. So a buddy of mine just texted me out of the blue and was like, my buddy Matt Wren, he was like, hey, why don't you just call it the nut job? Because it's basically a circus peanut. And I was like, oh yeah, a bit of a nut job, and kind of only like to fish with nut jobs, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and it doesn't take you down the whole Addams family, cousin it thing, right?
Yeah, they're Schultz and Silverio were big on the cousin it, and while it does look like cousin it, I think it's kind of a negative connotation.
Yeah, fair enough. You could have called it the Uncle Fester. Right. So, if we step back in the time machine, what was the hole in your fly box you were trying to fill when you started designing the nut job?
So it wasn't really like I had an idea to create that fly. I was very regular on Logjam Live at the time, and was staying at my friend Frank's house and didn't have like my big bag of hen saddles, but I did have craft fur. And everyone was talking about the bad hair day for like weeks on Logjam. So I was like, what if I made like an articulated bad hair day? And so the first version had, I think, 3 tines of craft fur on the front. Usually I tie stuff way too dense until I fish it, and then I'm like, oh, I need to take some stuff out of here. So after fishing the fly that I tied on Logjam and it was kind of doing donuts, I was like, well, the profile looked good. I took one tie-in out. I think I just razored that fly, and when I went back out with it, it was like basically like a little glide bait, and it casted a lot easier than the hen saddle flies. So from a guide perspective, it was like it's not like casting a woolly bugger, but it's a little bit easier than a soaked like leggy boy or something like that.
Yeah. Plus, particularly with COVID and afterwards, it's been pretty difficult to get high quality saddles, and they're not cheap.
Yeah. And that's the big thing too. Like it's just a different material than it used to be, in my opinion. And not like worrying about wasting a good saddle on a fly tying order, or like I would like be tying a yellow leggy boy and be like, well, like I only got like three more of these left in this saddle, and then I got to wait 6 months for the next drop. It was kind of it's a weird place to be when you like rely on these things.
Yeah, it's a terrible addiction, right?
It used to be, yeah, yeah. Plenty of big bags of hen saddles laying around.
Yeah. And so, you mentioned the bad hair day, but, tell us a little bit more about kind of the anglers and tires that inspired the design.
Um, so yeah, the Bad Hair Day is a fly by Dave Pinchkowski, and it's like the ultimate simplistic fly that has density in the front of the head, utilizing the craft fur butts. And I obviously like completely just adapted that to the Circus Peanut platform. Um, my idea, or when I first started using Shank hook platforms, that was with the Lafkus brushhead deceiver, and that fly really changed like what I thought of fly tying, because I came into the game, pretty recently, like 2017, 2018 is when I started really getting into tying, and like I was spending more time tying than doing anything else when I was off the water. So I was big into tying, changers and swinging Ds, and it kind of like cut my teeth on those flies. Um, and I'm glad I started with like, the more complex stuff, because it made everything else a little bit more natural, I guess. Like kind of like starting with changers and then going to peanuts. But the Lafkus brushhead deceiver is by far the easiest fly to make a fish want to eat. It's just like kicks really well, really easy to cast. It's like a guide's dream. Um, and then I guess that brings me to, so yeah, like changer platform, swinging Ds. I really liked Schulte's Fluttercraft. That was a fly that I tied like two of, and that's a craft fur based fly. Um, the crafty changer, I pretty much learned from Schultz by getting some feedback on the heads being too narrow. And I guess bring it all home with the Circus Peanut. I mean, that's essentially like the chassis of the nut job. So like you got a shank in the back with a big splayed marabou tail, just like I learned from seeing Russ tie and seeing his flies first on Instagram. And then you have your chenille core and then a veil. And that recipe, I mean, you can do a lot of different things with that, but for the swim fly and getting that like walk the dog, like neutral buoyancy, suspending action, I think craft fur might be, well, I know it's my favorite material for the job.
Got it. And, you've touched on this a little bit. And obviously, after that first nut job, you weren't trying to get it to swim donuts. So as you were tuning the pattern, what was the specific bite trigger you were trying to incorporate into the fly?
So my favorite thing to do in the springtime is like fish a bright fly. This is a very common pastime for people, but fishing a bright fly that kicks. So like it might kick the length of the fly, like most flies do, and then you have like the Fluttercraft, which was really cool because it had a resin coated mallard flank back, and it was like tied upside down on a jig hook with a ton of weight. And that fly, because of all that weight, could actually move further than the length of the fly, more like a glide bait. Um, so after fishing that, my expectations kind of changed, but I never tied another one. So I ended up fishing a lot of craft fur changers, and that kind of gave me like the best of both worlds, like not tying with all that resin, but still having like a big glowy fly that kicks really well and like has a really predictable like glide bait action.
Got it. And so, why don't you walk us through kind of that, not the original one that did the donuts because no one wants to fish that, right? But kind of the current state of the art pattern, maybe kind of from the back to the front.
Um, so selecting the right pieces of marabou, and one thing I learned was like when you're using a full like 2 inches for your marabou tail, like suddenly like the whole pack becomes usable. So like I used to only use maybe 15-20% of a pack when I was making small marabou tails for like changers and woolly buggers. But when you're using 2 inches, for some reason, like that almost seems like the feathers were meant to be used uh, at that tie-in point. So using two really dense feathers. If the feathers I grab are a little bit more sparse, then I'll use 3 without hesitation. And that's tied on. I have a bunch of the like original Blaine shanks. So I cut a 25 mil shank basically in half, so it's like a pinpoint, and then I put that in the vise, and that gives you like a nice, uh, clean platform for that marabou to lay flat. And I'm sure if you tied it on a traditional shank with the ramp, I'm sure it'd be fine. You just don't want to tie it up all the way on the ramp. And then I'll just do a few wraps of finesse chenille. I was putting hen saddle back there just to make it prettier, but I've come to learn that that doesn't change anything. So saving a couple bucks per fly there. And then bringing what I learned from the brushhead deceiver and the circus peanut with using Maxima Chameleon to connect the flies or connect the hooks. So I'm using Maxima Chameleon 25 pound to connect that rear shank to the hook. And I've never had a failure, especially back there because there's no, nothing's pulling on it. But from there, um, I'm going to do, actually, there are 2 rubber legs or sometimes up to 4 rubber legs on that tail shank. And I'll just put that over the finesse chenille so it kind of like veils over the whole tail. And starting on that rear hook, going to go like finesse chenille, let's say halfway, 3 legs, finish the other third, 3 more legs, or you do 4 legs. The more legs you add, the more it's just kind of gonna like suspend before it starts to turn with the current. It's kind of like just more drag, acts like a parachute. And then you're gonna do your reverse tie of craft fur, and again, like keeping the butts in, just like the bad hair day. Then I'm going to use Maxima Chameleon again to connect the rear hook to the front hook. And I think it's pretty important to, I use like a couple 6 mil beads, either 2 or 1. But when you're securing that Maxima to the front hook, I really like to put super glue right kind of like where that, where the mono meets the shank. Because I have had that not pull out, but I've had that like kind of break free side to side. So for years now, I've been using like Loctite blue gel on that, and then I'll just get some real tight wraps, and I haven't had that problem since. But um, same thing as the rear hook, you're just going to add 2 tines of craft fur instead of 1, and you're going to keep maybe you want the butts to be about 3/4 of an inch for like a 5-inch fly, 4.5-inch fly, and however much of the butts you keep and how tall that is, that'll be your starting profile for the fly. And typically I'll add more legs to the 2 tie-ins of legs in the front.
Got it. And I know you're really particular too about the positioning of the legs on the fly.
Yeah, I like to position them on like airing on the top of the shank rather than just on the sides. I think it adds to that kind of like parachute suspending action.
Yeah, and I also know too that you're like, it's kind of funny. I watched the video you did with Schulze preparing for the interview. You're super fastidious, right? And so you also, don't you have a trick with the shank positioning to help you get a better taper in the fly as well?
Yeah. So actually, yeah, I forgot something very crucial in that connection to the rear hook. So I started tying this fly by using like a 20 mil shank to connect the tail shank to the rear hook. And I would leave, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch kind of like hanging out the back of the rear hook. So I would connect that, like how I learned from James Hughes, but like you put the shank in the vise, wrap thread on it. So that gives you like a better base to like kind of cinch it down into the thread that's going to be on the hook. But that was just me getting the tail further from the tie-in of craft fur on the rear hook. Now I will use a 4mm bead, and that saves a lot of headache, and I haven't noticed any difference in fishability, but kind of saves you some time there. But if you buy 4mm beads from like Jansen at Craft or whatever, you just thread that through the maxima, and basically you're just spacing that tail away from the craft fur.
Got it. Yeah. So you're basically using the same technique that you're using to attach the hooks.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it. And so, as you were kind of experimenting with the pattern, are there any materials that just didn't make the final cut?
Yeah, I had tried putting a little bit of a brush head on the front, and there just doesn't need to be any more density added. I feel like I did some smaller ones with translucent brush just because I wanted to burn some money, I guess. But I found like finesse chenille from Hairline seems to be by far like the slipperiest material for the core of that fly. And by that I mean the fly is just gonna kick and travel a bit better. It doesn't have as much drag as some of the other like stiffer materials. And if you want to kind of like beef up your profile a little bit, Senyo satin chenille works really well too. So if you wanted to, let's say my average nut job is like 4.5 to 5 inches. If I wanted to tie a 6-inch fly, I would use satin chenille. And because of the taper that you're creating, you have to use more craft fur butts. So naturally, you have to add more weight to fish it in a zone that you want to fish. And the weight kind of helps propel that fly. So the satin chenille isn't inhibiting the action. So I wouldn't use satin chenille necessarily for the single or the standard, but I do like it for creating a little bit bigger profile on like a 6-7 incher.
Got it. It's a great segue into my next question, which is, obviously, you have a synthetic focus versus natural materials in the nut job, and because you could have done bucktail or something else, but obviously selecting synthetics over naturals affects kind of flow and how much water passes through and around the fly. How did making that synthetic over natural decision affect the fly's design?
So the decision to keep rolling with that platform, and let's start at like my faith in craft fur. So that came from the craft fur changers and then the brush head deceiver. And I was messing with like after spending years tying crafty changers, whether they were too sparse or too full, like kind of got that figured out a little bit. And then I was messing with densities on the brush head deceivers, and I noticed that you could really get some more profile and a little bit different kick, like maybe like more extreme kick if you like kind of beefed up the craft fur. And I wasn't using butts. That's just kind of like tying it in, not even reverse. You're just tying it in on like a little bucktail prop on the brush head. And I started to develop a lot of confidence in the fishability of it. And even when it's tied densely, like as long as you're not using too many like butts, like craft fur acts a lot like it just like a hen saddle or like slopping. Like there's something about it where like the water's flowing through it, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to like deflect water. It's a very interesting material, and like fishing this fly, I don't know, it's really fun, and it was like it's kind of unpredictable like after the pause. So that's kind of what kept me going with like even just like I never thought I would have a pattern. I was very content with fishing peanuts, changers, swinging D's, whatever. But it was kind of just like curious to explore where this fly could go. And there's probably more like development that could happen with resins. I'm not a huge fan of, tasting resin on my fingers 4 hours after using it.
It does get everywhere too, dude. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal is, but like it gets everywhere. But, any kind of tips or tricks kind of related to proportions or weighting you can share with folks? In terms of like, you know, how to kind of pick the bundles of craft fur to, like, I know you like to kind of place beads about, I don't know, a third to a halfway back sometimes, on the front hook, like combinations or tricks to kind of get your flies tuned the right way you want to share with folks.
Yeah, I think getting a clean cut from the sheet of craft fur is like the most important thing. Like before you even like start tying with craft fur, you need to be good at cutting craft fur. And then you need to be good at transitioning it from your right hand to your left hand or vice versa and flipping it because you're going to be reverse tying it. Like it's not the easiest material to work with, and it really helps to be like kind of a slow, methodical craft fur cutter. Like it doesn't pay to rush it because then you just end up with like a loose clump of craft fur. You can't throw it in a hair stacker, So, I think making sure that you're cutting like as close to that backing material as you can, and then being very careful when transferring it. You want to be like handling the craft fur very close to where you cut it, so then you're not losing any of that bulk that you're trying to keep for the head, the bulk or the butts. But yeah, so as far as weighting goes, I will switch between keeling 3/16 tungsten beads and 7/32 tungsten beads. And the 7/32 are kind of reserved for that, like really big profile, like 5.5 to 6 inch fly, and like high flows. Like I was catching a lot of big fish early, like in really early spring last year on 7/32 nut jobs, and they're necessary. But as soon as that current speed starts to drop and it's like almost average flows in the river that I fish, like it's just too heavy. You can't really stall it. So that's where the 3/32 or just keeling it on the boat comes into play. I think 3/32 is like it's definitely going to sink more than be like neutrally buoyant, but it keeps you in the game longer in faster current speeds than just keeling it would.
Got it. And I guess you like to, obviously you're cutting the craft fur close to the backing, but I suspect you probably pull the tips when you're trying to size the clumps to tie in as opposed to cutting them, right?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So I learned from Mike Schultz to rip the tips at some point. It must have been like during COVID. He was doing like classes maybe, or it was like on the craft fur changer YouTube video, but he was ripping the tips. And so I started doing that. And at first it was like, that was kind of like a technique that I had to wrap my head around, but that preserves the density of the clumps so much better than like pulling tips out to match like the length that you want. So it also gives you just a much more full look when you're tying shorter clumps of craft fur. So yeah, practice ripping the tips too, because that helps a ton, and it'll just get you a nicer looking taper.
Got it. And so, can you share kind of your kind of preferred hook and shank combinations, maybe for your favorite sizes and maybe some favorite color combos?
Yeah. So I would say as far as hooks go, I'm only using Arex and occasionally B10Ss. The standard size is going to be that like 25 mil shank that I cut in half. I guess it could be a 15 if you're just using a standard shank. And then a size 2 trout predator, either light or standard, to a size 1. Sometimes I'll do 1 and 1/0, especially like, just squeezing a little bit more length out of a fly. And the hook penetration doesn't really go down in the springtime that little bit of exercise kind of helps. I have done some with a one in the back and then 2 beads and then like a 2/0 worm hook like you would see on the Swing D in the front. And that's a little long for just craft fur, so you can use like a little bucktail tie-in to kind of prop the craft fur up a little bit, kind of learning from the Lafkus fly. And I have had success with the Lafkus platform with like a Shank, a size 4 trout predator, and a size 2 minnow up front. So I tied some nut jobs on that platform and caught trout in the West Branch of the Delaware with that. And it was a nice smallmouth fly. And I haven't tied any because I started tying a single version. And I'm tying that with 2 shanks off of a size 2 or a size 1 B10S.
Got it. And on the single nut job, any other adjustments you need to kind of make in the tie, to make it swim like the regular nut job?
So I feel like there was more thought that went into that than the double. Because usually sizing down a swim fly is you lose a lot because it must have something to do with like the diameter of the fly line and then your leader. But for some reason, like micro changers, like I could never tie them myself to where I was like, oh, like I'll fish this. Even like some smaller finesse changers, like when you lose length, you lose a lot of that kick. So when I sized down the nut job, I wasn't really expecting much, but for some reason, I was watching something with Russ, or maybe even we were talking at Bob in the Hood, and he was talking about, you know what, Marvin? It was on your podcast, I think. He was talking about putting 2 shanks off of the rear hook for the flicker tail, and like for the big tailwater circus peanuts. And I was like, well, what if I did like tail and then a shank just for movement in the middle? Like not really movement on the swim, but movement as far as like getting that tail to kind of like touch the eye of the hook, which is what you'll see on like a Game Changer or a shank hook fly. So I think I was like cleaning my truck, listening to that podcast, went in and tied one. And I was like, well, this looks kind of silly because it's just marabou with finesse chenille and then some rubber legs and then a shank that just has finesse chenille and then like, standard front hook nut job setup. So it looked a little silly, but the tail hit the eye of the hook. And that gave me confidence to actually fish it. And when I fished it in the spring, I was like, oh, okay, this is like a single hook fly that I'm actually going to fish. So that was more exciting to me than the actual like what we're talking about today, like the nut job. I think the single was definitely more of a surprise to me.
Very neat. And so, what are some common mistakes that folks make when they tie the nut job or even the single nut job?
Too sparse is something I see a lot. Usually doesn't happen very like super often because I'll like if someone tags me in something and it looks too sparse, I'll just say like, hey, like, try adding twice as much craft fur to the front, 1/4 inch longer on the butts, and then most of the ones I'm seeing now are like dialed, which is sick. Like it's really cool to see people tying the fly and like tying it really well. Whereas I feel like some of the other swim flies are a little bit like the nut job's nowhere near as popular, so there aren't people posting a lot of poor ones, But I'm just really excited to see people tying them well. I think when you're tying the tail, like if you watch the video, you can see like I'm a very anal or thoughtful tire. Like I take consideration in like every time I tie in a material, I'm like looking at it to make sure it's exactly where I want it. So getting the tail to look right and act right, you have to hold the feathers by the tips, and then anything that isn't being captured by your fingers needs to come off of that plume of feather. So it makes it look a lot cleaner, and then you're also not getting more bulk at the tie-in point than you have at the end of the feather. So you get more of that like proper like full wag of the tail on your pauses. It's the other tips. I think it's very easy to go too heavy on the chenille. So I'm not doing like touching wraps like you would be if you were tying a finesse changer, anything where you wanted to like add density with that core. The core is strictly just to like keep that material off the shank, and it's also a very like flat material. So like finesse chenille is going to deflect water, and I think like that aids into like the slipperiness property that material has as the core of a fly. As far as silicone legs go, I think you should add as many as you want because you can always rip them off if it swims weird. But I'm a big fan ever since Mike put the leggy boy out. Like I've been a huge fan of that fly, and I haven't fished a ton of standard feather changers. There's just something about a skirted swim fly that just works. So don't be afraid to add like 6 legs total on the back, 8 legs total on the front. You could do 10 on the front. And like I said, you could always cut them off on the water. You know, it's like flash. If you're tying in like flash, but you can always cut some off. And yeah, I think a general tying tip, like not even just for the nut job, but for these people who are getting into tying swim flies or aren't happy with their swim flies that they have tied, I think just taking the time to like watch how the guys tie them who created the fly, like every little movement at the vise is something that has years of experience behind it, and like people don't even know what they're doing. Like, I've tried to like teach classes before, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I didn't even realize I did this, but I should probably like explain this. You know, it's just take as much time as you can to like learn how to tie the flies correctly. Take care in every tie-in because you don't want things to be falling out while you're on the water. You're spending like 30 to an hour on the fly. You don't want it to be falling apart. But yeah, I mean, just don't go into it and expect to tie a good swim fly the first try unless you do the research.
Got it. Any tools that folks should have at their bench to make it easier to tie the nut job?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you could have is either it's something to push the craft fur back for like a clean, like almost circular profile. And for a long time, I've been using a Bic pen. I don't know where I picked that up from. So, some big tire tying bucktail probably, but I've been using the MN fly, like the standard fly tool, and that thing it's like a Bic pen made of glass. Basically, it's like the Ferrari of Bic pens as far as like pushing back materials go. So for a long time, I'd be breaking thread, doing half hitches on the pen, and it was just all chewed up, and I would get a new pen and it gets all chewed up. So this thing just, it makes life a lot easier, and I've been like really happy with it. And it's like, it's not often, there's like something comes along that just like makes life a lot easier at the tying desk. So I was very, very pleased with that.
Yeah, well, I'll try to find it and drop a link to it in the show notes. And, if we shift gears to fishing the fly, where do you generally like to fish the nut job in the water column?
I like to fish it as high as I can while still getting eats. So that's kind of where like the multiple weight options comes into play. Sometimes fishing that bright fly where you can still see it isn't the right move in dirty water. So like you have the bright fly, the fish can see it, but it might be out of your, out of your sight, and the fish are going to pick it up. But it kind of, you lose that element of fishing a bright swim fly that makes it fun. But yeah, I mean, I fish it like a circus peanut in March. So I'm fishing it meaning I'm fishing it low with a 730 seconds, or just kind of like dead drifting at 3/16 on a type 3 sink tip. But as soon as fish start looking up in the water column and start chasing, like I'll start to fish a little bit lighter. So I'll be like 3/16 and then 0.25 or 0.30 keel, killing it on the water.
Got it. You changed the fly line?
Um, this year, I think we talked about it in the Roost report. I fished the Type 3 sink tip for a long time, way more than I normally would have. And I think just the way I'm fishing with like manipulating the rod and the line so much as opposed to just stripping the fly, that the running floating line allows you to control the fly a lot better and across multiple currents or even just like one current scene. So this year I didn't switch to an intermediate until pretty late in the season. Normally I'd be fishing it like the whole season and then I would throw the Type 3 on with a really buoyant fly or something. But the intermediate was more in play under like average conditions for me this year with the nut job.
Got it. And what's your favorite flavor of leader setup?
Leader setups, like pretty standard Schultz Outfitters video setup. I used hatch fluorocarbon for a long time. Now I've kind of like been messing around with different tippet ends just because that 16-pound got expensive. So I'm doing 30-pound fluoro or 35-pound fluoro to 30 or 25, and then to 20, a really short section of 20 at about 18 inches of the other two. You can go a little bit longer on the heaviest section for ease of turning over. And then maybe 2 feet plus a couple inches of Sunline FC leader material. And I've been using that in 16 and 20 pound.
Got it. And so why don't you walk us through how you like to fish the nut job to get the desired action?
Lots of like being pulled into slack, whether that's a hard strip, maybe like while you're stripping, drop your rod tip to the surface of the water. And then when you're done stripping, bring your rod tip back up a few inches to where it started, similar to how you'd see guys like fish a jerkbait. Introducing slack into your strip or the fly movement at all is going to allow the fly to do what it was designed to do. And flies have limitations compared to conventional gear. So giving the fly every bit of chance to succeed is all you can do. So I like to throw like what I say are mends, but it's probably just like an upward jerk that moves the line. And then I might like jerk upward and then mend after, but it's not like a thoughtful mend. It's just kind of like moving the line. So that will give you like the ultimate amount of slack, obviously, because you're mending it. So using the rod tip and just like, I would recommend just getting creative because I see people do similar things that have never fished with each other, but they're all doing the same thing to give that fly just a ton of slack and like a hard movement, maybe like twice the length of the fly max. So you're talking like 12 inches max, as opposed to like 3 feet. See some guys moving flies way too far. You really want to like maximize that fly's movement, whether it's gliding like side to side or jigging up and down. Like you want to be doing that in a confined area where you think the fish are, right? Like we're not just like going out and like ripping spinner baits. So yeah, giving that fly the most slack you can in any way you can will work as long as you can still set the hook afterwards. So I would recommend like downward jerks while you're stripping. Maybe jerk to the side, throw a little mend the opposite direction, jerk straight up, mend upstream, jerk straight up, mend downstream. Like just get creative. And you don't have to just strip the fly back to the boat. It gets old after a while anyway.
Yeah. So what we're really talking about is however you want to do it. Captain's choice. It's basically strip and stall, right?
I would say move and stall. Yeah. Move it, introduce slack, and let it do its thing.
Got it. Awesome. Well, and I also know that, you can catch stuff, other than trout and smallmouth on the nut job. If folks want to go chase other species, kind of what are some adjustments they may need to make to the platform?
So when it comes to like other species that I've tied for, it's pretty much only muskie and stripers at this point. So for the muskie version, I think I mentioned I was using translucent fiber to kind of like just be a taller base to that fly. And I was doing shank hook. So using a shorter shank hook in the back. It was like a 4/0 short shank. And then one of the big game shanks, I think it was like 35 millimeters in the middle and a 5/0 up front. So the total length with like a 2.5-inch marabou tail is only like 8 inches, maybe like 8 1/4. But tie that in like black or like a suckery color. Like I've had good success with it. And then same platform, but with a American Rooster knife tail. I've had a lot of success, or I've seen a lot of success with that while I'm rowing. But yeah, Leslie just put like I don't know, it was very large. It was between like 45 and 50, probably closer to 50. Um, I watched that thing devour a 9-inch fly, and then it felt like I had to put my arm in up to my forearm to get it out. It looked like a woolly bugger in the thing's mouth. But yeah, like using bucktail to prop up the craft fur on those 8 and 9-inch versions helps a lot with profile. And you can even do like a little, like maybe like a micro Buford under the craft fur tie-ins in the front. Because once you're using the full length of the cheetah craft fur, like it gets a little wispy. Um, so you're still able to utilize the butts, but adding that little bit of a Buford kind of just allows that fly to stop a little bit more and start that kick early. As far as tying for stripers go, I've tied some like peanut bunker sized ones. Tied that with a kind of like single nut job style, just so you don't have two hooks in a striper's face or throat. But two shanks. Pick your shank. I would go like maybe 15 in the back, 20 in the middle, Maxima bead connection, and then like an Arex 1/0 minnow hook. And um, we need to circle back and talk about colors. Actually, I just
Oh,
realized that.
that's okay. We're there now. How about that?
Sweet. So craft fur comes in a ton of good colors, and there are also a ton of duds. I don't have the list of duds off the top of my head, but it it allowed me to think a little bit differently than hen, because hen was always limited. Like you could never go to a shop and get every color you wanted to get. And if you were lucky enough to have them all, then you can make some cool blends or whatever. But most shops will have at least like 8 colors of craft fur. So I am a big fan. Let's start earlier in the season. So we got like dark green, sometimes green brown water. I really really like to fish olive and black, and I when it's wet, because the black is on top of the olive, like you could probably just get away with fishing an all black like 5-inch nut job. But the key to that fly is adding a couple turns of copper polar chenille over the finesse chenille. So you're getting like circus peanut level of polar flash, but the nut job action. And my God, I think that color accounted for like most of the big fish. And I was fishing that every day with clients for like a month. Like if they mentioned like, oh, I wonder if they'd eat yellow, like yeah, we'd switch to yellow and catch some fish on it. But fishing that olive black fly is just like, it's got my confidence now. Not as fun, but when I'm fishing that, like you can't see, like I was mentioning earlier, like when you're fishing a bright fly and you can't see it, so it's not worth it. Like you can't see it anyway, so you might as well go dark when the fish can see it. And then when the water kind of like gets a little bit more green, like a few feet of visibility, I'm going all yellow or yellow with orange veiling the yellow. Like to call that Flame Boy, a little like World Industries throwback. But that is a huge confidence color, and that's what Leslie caught that muskie on. There's something about the way like we've talked about it a bunch of times on the Roosh Report, but like the way that yellow and orange kind of like throws out like a glow in the water, it's like luminescent or something. But yeah, that's a favorite to fish. As things get more clear, going with your more like tan over cream or tan over white, olive over white. You can mess around a ton with more of, like, the natural colors. I don't think there's a bad combination of any of the following. Could be like white, cream, tan, medium olive, um, dark olive, camel, kind of like the ginger of the craft fur. But yeah, there's just so many possibilities with craft fur that I don't think I've scratched the surface of what's possible, but I definitely have more than enough to cover all the ranges that I need.
Very, very cool. And before I let you go this evening, anything on the fly tying or the fly fishing front you want to share with folks?
So I'm off the water a little bit more these days, but I will be at Bob and the Hood at Schultz Outfitters the end of January, I think, into the first day of February. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'll be teaching a class for the first time there this year, and it is sold out, which I really appreciate. Be tying the single nut job and the nut job. And I really hope that I can find the time to resurrect Logjam from its nap. But that's a ton of fun. That's Tuesdays, 8:35-ish. I think it might be the exact time right now. But yeah, I also may be able to take you out in the spring. I'm looking pretty full right now as far as what I'm able to guide. But yeah, if we could make it happen, I would love that, and would love to introduce more people to the bite that is giant smallmouth in the spring. There's really nothing like it on the East Coast.
Yeah, and so why don't you let folks know where to find you on social media and on the web?
You can find me at ruchangling.com. That's right, it's official. Ruch Angling on Facebook, Brendan Ruch on Instagram, and yeah, ruchangling@gmail.com.
Well, there you go. And I think there's still some general admission tickets left for Bob, and don't quote me on that. But, if you're into this predator fly game, you owe it to yourself to grab a ticket and head up there. It's a great weekend. The general admission tickets get you into the Friday night party, all day Saturday, over at the Freight House, sit down, talk to the tires, and then you can see, Brendan and other folks. So you can sign up for the classes if there's spaces available, and learn from the best. So, Brendan, I appreciate you squeezing me in after your burrito bowl this evening to talk about the nut job.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun. And, folks, we'll have Brendan back in the spring when he's back on the water, and we'll go down the Central PA smallmouth route again. Well, listen, Brendan, I appreciate it. Have a great holiday season, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, man. See you, Bob in the Hood.
Take care. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed the interview as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Before we leave you, one more thing. If you listen to the podcast, you know about trout routes. If you fish Midwest lakes, you owe it to yourself to check out its sister app, Onyx Fish Midwest. Onyx Fish takes the guesswork out of finding new places to fish. Search and filter lakes by species, size, and abundance, plus get local details and background info so you can show up with a plan A and as many backup plans as you want. Make the most of your time on the water. Head over to onyxmaps.com today. And remember, links to all this episode's sponsors are in the show notes. Check them out. Fish hard, folks.